And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Two Back Set Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Thomas, aka Mr. Warburg. Alongside me, as always, is Patrick, aka Mr. Fusion.
Greetings and salutations, football fans. We are in week 3? Officially week 3? Are
Well,
we
it's
calling this
technically
week
week
3?
2. Week 0
Technically,
is, you started at 0, even though that's the first week. It's numbers are fun like that. But
yeah.
yeah, it's episode 3 here for week 2's preview.
Yep.
I think college football needs to be like, okay, stop this week 0 shit. That's just week
Yeah.
1. But it's its own thing. It's kind of weird.
Hey, we also have the first 4 of the tournament in March
It's
Madness
kind
and
of
all that.
that for March Madness, like for what March Madness is for the postseason. So like I said, we're on week 2, so we're gonna have a little brief thoughts on last week for our two main teams, which are me for Iowa, obviously I'm wearing a Hawkeye hat, and Texas for Fusion. Don't have a ton to say about those games because we're gonna also talk about the games that they each have this week. So we'll have some kind of melding of the reaction and the preview for both, along with game notes for each. We'll talk our picks pool. We've got 5 games. Fusion and I both went 5-0 last week, which I'm actually like, hey, we did pretty good. And we have one of our listeners, Eddie. He also went 5-0, so he's tied with us. And Centralka, sorry if you're listening to this, you're 1-4. You didn't do so hot, but it's a weekly 5-game pick'em, so you got all season to catch up. One point per win. Let's see what happens. All right, so Fusion, where do you want to start? You want to start Texas and their hard-fought battle over Rice, and then of course their big game against Alabama. I think we should probably start there.
Let's start there. Texas, that defense is going to be very, very good this season. They're going to give a lot of teams trouble, man. They are stacked from top to bottom. Like, I think the biggest issue for me, and I think for people, is their edge rushing linebackers are freshmen. Like, the current guys that are starting are upperclassmen, but they're not as good as the freshmen that are behind them. But the freshmen got reps in in the second half on Saturday. But I think that's going to be the difference there, is that, but the defensive line is just phenomenal. The secondary is phenomenal. Jalen Ford, which is the only linebacker that you can really just say put your hat on, is their middle linebacker is really good. So the other things I was a little disappointed in were, I thought the play calling the first half for the Longhorns could have been a lot better. Very lackluster, 16-3 going into halftime, but it didn't look very good. It was a very ugly first half for them. The receivers weren't getting open. They weren't finding a lot of lanes. The running backs were. C.J. Baxter, the freshman that started, went down. The running back went down. Promising stuff from the second half. Much better play calling. Better red zoning. Obviously, scored a few touchdowns in the third quarter. The running back situation is going to be okay, but I think going forward, they're going to really have to find opportunities for Jalen Blue and Jonathan Brooks, the other two running backs, to get them kind of get their touches. I'm wondering what happened to Keelan Robinson, the transfer that came in last year, the little speedy guy. He just doesn't see the field a lot. I want to know why. Obviously, there's something there that Sark does not like about him, not put him out there. But a guy transferred in from, I think, was it USC? I don't even remember where he came from last year. But yeah, wasn't a big blowout for the Longhorns. A lot to take away, which I think it's a good thing, man. It wasn't that.
It was a 27-point win. Let's be clear.
Yeah, but it wasn't. But it wasn't 73-0 or something crazy like Oklahoma.
True.
running up the score, or Alabama, who I still think their offense is suspect, managed to score 56 points, but look who they were playing last Saturday. This is a little different. I think there was a lot of tinkering going on, which I was okay with, because you have to, getting ready for the big game in Tuscaloosa. And I think that was a big thing. I think a lot of these kids were looking ahead, man, and that's a dangerous thing later in the season. Not right now, because they weren't going to lose to Rice. But had they played another team like a Maryland or a Rutgers, like in years past, they could have been caught by, or Wyoming, they could have been caught by surprise, right? Not against Rice, they're not, but I think they were looking ahead to Tuscaloosa. I really do think that they were looking to. I think Sark pulled them in the locker room at halftime and gave them a chewing out about that, because they looked a lot more focused in the second half. With that said, I'm really excited about this Saturday, man. This is going to be a dogfight in Tuscaloosa. An absolute dogfight, man. Defense versus, there's not a lot of skill. Like, the weapons for Alabama are okay, but it's all about play calling and coaching up. Well, The coaching up's there. Sark has the experience working with Saban. He knows any trick plays the guy's going to throw out there. Outside of that, it's all about execution and minimizing turnovers, man. That's what happened last year. Got to happen again this year. The only difference is that you got to keep Quinn Ewers in the game. Keep
Well,
him in the
another big
game.
one is that Alabama doesn't have Bryce Young.
No,
Because
and
that's what won of the
Milroe.
game was, hey, they had Bryce Young, and
Yep,
that's why they
yep.
won
That,
last year.
that was the only reason why they won that game because he was on his ass for 3.5 quarters, and then he
Then he was like, oh,
managed
yeah, I
to.
won a Heisman. I got this.
I got a Heisman. I'm the leader. Okay, let me go ahead and lead this team to victory, which is what great football players do, right? He did that, and that's. I think that Texas game got him the number one overall pick. I really do feel that because people saw the leadership versus where had a really good season and not a big event like that against Texas, who had a really great showing defensively that week. Um, I think Stroud would have been the number one quarterback last year because at the end of it, he was phenomenal against Georgia. In a loss, he was phenomenal. But I think Young got that he got that first overall pick spot based off of this game against Texas. I really do think that. Um, yeah, I'm really excited about Saturday, man. Really, really excited, man. Rice, Rice is Rice. A lot to learn there. Wasn't a blowout. Wasn't exactly a very tight game, but a lot. I think there were a lot of mistakes that here and there that the team can take away and get ready for Alabama, man. So yeah,
So you got a prediction?
I'm picking the Longhorns, man. I'm gonna pick the Longhorns, and it's going to be a close game. I'm gonna say it's going to be 31-28 Texas. And the reason why I feel that way is Ewers is the better quarterback. I love the Longhorns defense. I think the defensive line can cause havoc. The only thing is I think Alabama, obviously Milroe he still needs to be tested. And the other thing is I don't think they have a really deep receiving core. So I'm picking Texas in the shocker. But do you call it a shocker?
Well,
Because
the line is 7.5, so I would certainly call it an upset because it's
seven and
Alabama
a
at
half,
home.
yeah,
Like that is most definitely an upset. It's not, redefining the landscape of college football, kind of like
no,
Clemson versus Duke, which we'll get to them
yeah,
in a minute. That's
yeah,
definitely one of my like shockers of the week is from week one is that. But I certainly wanted to start with Texas Alabama because it's definitely the high profile matchup of the week. Honestly, the close second is going to be Nebraska Colorado, just because you wonder like
all eyes of Colorado.
post week one, do they backslide? Week one is it's the week of overreactions. The first in preseason it's all about hype. Week one is all about the massive overreaction, both either positively or negatively. So it comes, really week two, you really start to see, okay, what team are we dealing with here? Like last year for Iowa, once we all watched that Iowa State game, we're like, yeah, last week wasn't a fluke. That's what they are, right? And you see what they clean up, what they can't, what their deficits are with their personnel, and what are going to really shine. So
Well,
that should be interesting to watch.
most of the big name schools this week are playing cream puffs because this is their get ready for conference play game, right?
Yeah,
Versus Texas and Alabama are like, no, we're going to have a dogfight week two, which I think you mentioned this last week, and it's very on point. The winner of this game for you is going to be in the playoff.
they're
That's
they're
what
in the
you said.
driver's seat,
They're in the driver's seat at
either
this
for the
point
at
because
large or for the wherever their conference ends up.
yeah, yeah. I think that the Longhorns could still be in the playoff if they lose this
Oh, for
game,
sure. If they win out,
as long as if it's not a blowout. If
yeah,
it's not a blowout. If it's like, if Alabama rolls them for 27 points, I think it's going to be hard for the Longhorns to get in if they run the table, win the conference, win
yeah.
the Big
Assuming
12.
again no injuries and
Yeah,
they have a
yeah.
full complement at the end of the game.
So, but I think it's going to be a dogfight. I think 31-28 feels about right for me with Texas, Alabama in Tuscaloosa with Texas winning. Now, I will be honest with you. I did go back and forth for a few days for this, and I really thought about it earlier this afternoon, and I felt like, man, that defense, that Longhorn defense is big, athletic, and fast, and they hit. So it's like I think about that, and I think about I think the most comparable situation would be that Colorado, and we should talk about it in detail here in a little bit. But Colorado TCU, where TCU was that team coming off of that championship bid, and I think Alabama is kind of in the same vein as TCU, where they're a very good team, but we still don't know what they're going to be just yet until they're tested in the conference. but this is going to be a big test. People weren't prepared for Colorado to come in and test them, right? They weren't prepared for that. And I don't think people are not overlooking Texas, but I think people are also like people that have been making jokes about Texas are kind of like, okay, I'm going to pick Alabama. It makes sense to Texas to kind of do a silly Texas thing here and go in there and lose the game. Whereas I really think that this is a much better team. I really do. I think Sark has them coached up a lot better, given that what I saw in the second half. They made corrections and adjustments in the second half against Rice, where they were kind of like, hey, you could easily be blowing this team out, and they weren't executing. They did much more of that in the second half. So I really wish Arch Manning would have gotten some snaps in the fourth quarter because I think it would have been a good opportunity to get a feel because if something happens to Ewers again, you have Malik Murphy, but then you have Arch that's had some game experience at that point,
Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, for me, I'm still gonna go lean Alabama until I
Okay.
see otherwise. But you bring up a good point about their defense. They're obviously it's gonna be a big step up for Jalen Milroe over from Middle
Mhm.
Tennessee to Texas. What they have just in terms of athletes on the field, that's
Sure.
going to be a very big change. Now, obviously, he goes against Alabama's defense in practice, so it's not exactly going to be the biggest shock in the world. But in a game environment, it is going to be different, right? I believe it's going to be his first primetime start at Alabama. Like last week's wasn't a primetime game, right?
No, that wasn't a prime time game. That was an
Yeah,
early. I think that was a 2 o'clock game.
yeah. So it's obviously still a home game, but there's a very different environment. You got a premier program coming in who has a chip on their shoulder because of how last year's game ended.
Yep.
And a lot of those guys came back. Like they didn't lose that much on the defense. So in even like their offensive line's all there. But from what I've been seeing, Alabama's like their run game wasn't like overpowering. And with Texas's D line, that gives there's a much like where I'll get to with the Iowa State game later. That's definitely a pencil that matchup. Obviously, not exactly shocker analysis. Oh, watch the offense and defensive line, but it
Yep.
certainly seems to be a point of contrast for the two teams. So it's something to keep an eye on.
Yep.
Now, obviously, Alabama has one of guys should have stayed at Iowa, like Caden Proctor, 5-star that flipped the night of signing day.
Oh man.
What? And we're probably gonna lose another one. He's gonna. We have a guy who's 4 stars, probably gonna commit tomorrow. Colorado's gonna get him.
Yeah.
Deion's gonna go get him. He wants those big Midwestern guys.
Oh, Dion is flipping quite a few guys this week.
Yeah, and the kid's probably gonna end up. He might end up like one of those like 4 or 5-star guys. Like some are gonna rate him 5, some are gonna rate him 4. He's gonna commit to Iowa probably, and then we're gonna lose him, which sucks because our NIL's doing pretty well, but it's just not exactly Coach Prime level of chaos around their NFL. The hype isn't all the way there. Not
But
to
this is
mention,
this
Iowa needs a
this
new
is
offensive line coach
they
so
do.
fucking bad.
Well, they need muscle up there up front too. They do need some players. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
what?
lie.
It's not even muscle. They need speed. They're getting their
No,
ass
that's
beat
true.
on the edge. Like I was
Yeah.
watching the game, like man, they're collapsing everything. Every play you're running is a collapse. Like everything, all the holes are collapsing before Caleb Johnson can get going. Which is like, guys, abandon the fucking zone. These guys can't get on the edge and run. They're not like Marshall Yanda. That dude could fucking move. Right? He was a Hall of Famer, and you could tell it while he was at Iowa. Oh, that dude's going to the Hall someday. He was just fucking decleating people on poles and stuff, right? Just go play power with this line. They're built like a Wisconsin line. You got guys like winning the fucking like doing like the Salone Beef Days hay bale toss. Like that they got some strength. They don't have speed. Just abandon zone, go power run in Iowa would be much better.
Well, but Caleb Johnson's a big running back. He doesn't necessarily need
You
the
need
zone.
a hole though. You just need a
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah,
And
but
they're not getting any holes.
but
He's
he's a
power back.
power back. He's a
Yeah.
power back. So they're like, what's the point of running? I think
It's the classic case of Ferentz isn't like we're just recruiting the wrong people for the scheme.
well, and I think you mentioned this in Discord that given Caden McNamara's injury, don't expect a lot of bootlegging and play action because he really can't do that. You want to kind of get him through the season at this point is what you're really doing. You can't have the zone like you can't run the zone like that then
No, because
because
either you need to run a power scheme
yep,
where McNamara is just handing off, or you need to run shotgun, which then you would
shotgun's
return
probably
to
going to be
zone, but you're also not going to run a ton. You need to basically turn into your quick passes, your run kind of offense.
yeah because you're not getting the RPO out of it at all.
Yeah,
That
because
means
he
that
can't run.
he can't run.
And
So
Johnson just needs to be in there to catch blocks and go out to catch passes. Like you don't have a pass. You won't have a deep passing game if you don't start in the shotgun.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So we're moving officially to the Iowa State talk here.
Yeah.
The
Let's
battle
do
for
it.
the Cyhawk Trophy, which potentially is Kirk Ferentz's 200 win if he pulls it off career wise. I'm actually expecting a closer game than I would have a few weeks ago. But there's obviously, you got that week one overreaction. Iowa beats Utah State 24-14. It was not as close as a 10-point game. Not exactly a throttling, but like I said in my week one analysis, it's going to feel like Iowa was in control, and they were the whole time. There was never a, oh, Utah State's coming back moment. That just didn't happen. Even with their special teams miscues, with the block punt that still went for 37 yards, because of course an Iowa blocked punt still goes for 37 yards. But Utah State, I think it's a case of them being a little better than people predicted. They have a lot of transfers. I think it's actually more than Colorado in terms of, like, they had the most transfers in FBS, didn't they?
I think they did. I think you're
Yeah, so
right.
like I think it's a case of they were a little better than people thought, especially on the defensive side. Their line was legit. They were a little undersized, but they had some dudes. Like I said, with the speed, they were giving our offensive line problems. And then on special teams, they got that guy who blocked 4 punts last year. Like absolute just freak of nature. Like the dude was like freight train going in the backfield. Didn't matter who we had blocking him. He was getting in there. And I think he's going to do that to every team they face. And they're probably going to be much better in the Mountain West than was predicted
Yeah.
going into the season. But Iowa was still the better team, especially on defense, because our secondary, while we're down a guy, Jamari Harris is suspended through week 3 or through week 2. I think he comes back next week for shit. Who do we play next week? It's a W team. Is it Wyoming or Western Michigan? Western Michigan is a W team. But he's back next week. He's suspended because of, but presumably the gambling stuff.
Yep.
Didn't sound like he bet on any Iowa stuff. Just bet on some game that NCAA has a championship in, and of course was suspended for 2 games. But the backup looked decent, which of course Phil Parker. He's the defensive backs kind of guru in the country. Like you go play for him, you're gonna be playing on Sundays kind of guy. And Cooper DeJean dropped a pick 6 for sure. Like it just right in the tip drill, right in the breadbasket, dropped it. Xavier Wampa had one of the best safety plays I've seen in a while, where you could just tell, oh, he was intentionally baiting this quarterback. They were running a 2 deep, so and they're splitting their wide receivers out deep. So if you can get that safety in the middle, one of your guys is going to be open, right? So he takes a step like he's going to go after the guy to his left, but he knows he's got a guy directly cutting to his right, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna give him one step so he makes the read and throws, and then I'm just gonna go pick it off." It was an awesome interception. He nailed it. Like you were in Discord, you're like, "Damn, that was good."
Yeah. I
You can
was like,
tell that kid was a
that
5 star.
was an incredible pick, man. Just
Yeah,
like, yeah, he flat out just stole that ball from the in the
yeah.
air.
You could just
Yeah.
tell it was like, "Yep, I
Yep.
see exactly what this quarterback's gonna do. I got
Yeah.
this," and he read it perfectly. I imagine once Harris is back, the actual defense will get better. Jay Higgins, absolute stud at middle linebacker. I mean, I'm not going to say he's Jack Campbell because Jack Campbell was a 2-time All-American, but
Yep.
he looked every bit as good as we would expect as an Iowa middle linebacker. He had 16 tackles, right? I believe was it a fumble he forced? I can't remember, but I think he was the guy who broke up one of the plays that Cooper dropped the pick on. But like he was just reading everything pretty well. And then obviously once we put the backups into the second half, there were some very big. They got gashed for like a couple 40-yard runs. So the stats again look worse than they were. We were playing
Yeah.
backups versus their starters. Of course, it happened. Our defensive line is very deep, but the one thing I know we all kind of noticed watching the game, they don't have a rusher. They don't,
No.
unless you're bringing pressure. They don't have a way to get home consistently, which against most teams is probably like not the worst because you have one of the best coached secondaries in football. Like they're gonna make quarterbacks look silly because they give them these base vanilla reads, and then they basically gamesmanship the fuck out of you and force you into throws you think are fine, and then they come out of nowhere and just take the ball away because they're so disciplined with their zone schemes. So, like again, we're going into Iowa State. They're starting a second-time quarterback. He's a true freshman. They beat the crap out of UNI, but this is not the UNI of like 10 years ago where you could have made the case they would beat, maybe 50 teams in FBS. Like that was a damn good program. It was basically right before North Dakota State kind of had its ascension in FCS.
Yep.
That and those UNI teams were scary. They could beat a ton of teams in the Big Ten. They were loaded because they had a lot of 5th and 6th year guys. This was pre-transfer portal, pre-NIL. FCS guys were staying the whole time, and they had built a great program. This is not that program anymore. Much like their basketball program's kind of fallen off. And Iowa State came in, they kind of had a chip on their shoulder because everyone was doubting, like, they've had problems with UNI in years past. Are they going to do it again with all the gambling stuff? And then they beat the crap out of them. I do wonder, is there an emotional backslide, kind of like Colorado, Nebraska? Do they regress? Did they expend that much emotional energy, just kind of exercising those demons, and then you go into week 2 and you're playing a vastly more well-coached and deeper team? And obviously, the Colorado comparison kind of ends there because they're not playing somebody better than TCU. They're playing Nebraska.
Right.
But Iowa State's going UNI to Iowa. Like a team everyone is expecting to be contending for their division title. That is going to be a very big step up in competition for Rocco Brecht, I think his name is. Rocco Becht, no R. We had a Brody Brecht on our team. He's actually I believe, going to be a first-round MLB pick. Maybe he was. Did they have their draft yet?
No, that's not. Well, yeah, they did. It's in June.
Yeah.
Usually in June.
Yeah, he was. I think he was drafted because he's a guy who can throw 100 miles an hour. Former Iowa wide receiver, actually. But Rocco Becht is a true sophomore, so I would actually expect a few picks here or there, at least a few very dangerous passes. Their offensive line, much like Iowa's, kind of struggled a little bit in terms of opening massive holes. Both of our teams have really good defensive lines, so that may negate much of the run game. So it's going to come down, in my mind, to quarterback accuracy. I don't expect McNamara to make a lot of outside the pocket plays. Again, with that quad injury, it's never going to be 100%. It all really comes down to what packages do we assume Brian Ferentz is going to be competent enough to dial up.
Right.
I don't expect him to run shotgun, even though he probably should. Because you got a quarterback you don't want him bending down all the time on the leg under center. I would just assume, especially you got 2 great tight ends in the short game, with an experienced slot receiver, Nico Ragaini, got to remember to say his name right, and a couple decent running backs. You should be running more of a short to medium passing game. Kind of not air raid style, but you want short, quick passes. Old school, oh my God, 80s fucking 49ers coach.
Dave won.
Bill.
No.
No, not Parcells. It's the other one. The dink and dunk style, right?
Yes.
You know who I'm talking about, though. With Montana and Rice and all that, they had a lot of short game was their thing.
Bill Walsh.
That was it. I knew it was a dub.
West Coast offense.
Yeah,
Bill
you
Walsh.
want a West Coast you got to transition into kind of a West Coast style passing offense with your quarterback limitation right now.
Which is funny though, because traditionally most West Coast offenses are ran by running quarterbacks.
Yeah, and he could be, but he can't move. But he was still very accurate last week. He was 9 of 12 on 3rd and 4th down. He was still very accurate. He was still finding his spots, even when they knew Iowa's not being able to run the ball. He can't get out. He can't break contain. He was still able to find his spots. I just don't imagine Brian Ferentz is going to do that. I think he's going to stick to his guns and do the single back set and run his head into a wall, because that's what he's going to do. That's what he's always done, which is very frustrating, because one of my key notes for Iowa State is 14 of the last 15 winners have had the most rushing attempts. Not yards, attempts. So, really, they both try to sit in this game. Everybody tries to play the same way, which is ground, pound, control that clock, limit possessions, turnovers get magnified, which, of course, that generally favors Iowa in a rock fight kind of game against anybody in the country, really. So, I'm going to lean Iowa. I think the over-under right now, the point total is 35, which is the lowest in Iowa State's history. Not Iowa's. We had 2 33-point games last year for the over/under, which is crazy. But I'm thinking a 2017 kind of game. It's going to be close. The line's only 4. These games are always down to the wire beyond a few blowouts here and there.
I mean, it's obvious this is a game where Brian Ferentz relies on special teams and defense.
And that's the thing. With the new rules, which games are averaging 6 to 7 plays per less, so basically half a possession less. And he's got that 25-point thing. I don't think he gets 25 points this week.
No, obviously not.
And I don't know when he's going to. Maybe next week. And then it's going to be a bit. Because you got Michigan State, or Penn State, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of those games, other than maybe Purdue, because their defense isn't very good, at least so far. And obviously Michigan State, who knows what they are at this point with Mel Tucker. I don't know. Those two, maybe he gets above 25, but like he has too many more games under 25. He's going to need to start putting up some big numbers.
Well, don't be shocked.
And with a hobbled quarterback, it's just not going to happen.
Well, next week they're playing Western Michigan, so
they should. But again, Utah State, we heard 24.
Points. That's true.
It's just not how how we play the game, and it's very weird. We looked great those first two possessions, and then Cade tweaked his hamstring, and then Iowa was suddenly Iowa again. Is that going to be like that all season, where we're going to get 1 to 2 great sequences? How much of that is scripting from Ferentz, or maybe is it just because Cade's not 100%? It's a crapshoot at this point, so I'm sticking with the low scoring, 20 to 17 kind of score, leaning Iowa. Would not shock me if Iowa State pulls it out, though, because with our limitations on offense, anything is on the table in terms of we could play down to anybody. We always do anyway, especially with a limited quarterback.
I just think that Iowa State doesn't have any of the pieces that they had in years past.
Their defense is salty, though.
Yeah,
they were top 10 D last year.
But what I mean by that, but
on offense, position. I just don't see how they're going to score consistently enough. And Iowa has the better special teams, especially in this game, field goals. Our kicker is really solid. So if there was a game, Iowa State won 15-12 with all field goals. It was such a fluky game. Of course, El Assico has an all field goals game. Those kind of things, all those factors this year. But that's kind of muck fest of a game generally leans toward Iowa right now. But it's a rivalry game. It's early season. Hard to really say how it goes down, especially because Iowa State won last year on the road. They've typically struggled actually more in Ames versus Iowa. I think they've only won once since 2007. So generally, you got to favor Iowa in this one, but it's close. So, all right. So let's see. Any other notes I missed?
No, I think we've nailed our 2 games.
Yeah. So Fusion's picking 31-28 for Texas to win at Alabama, and I'm going 2017 Iowa to win at Ames. So I believe, speaking of picks, let's go through our picks pool, which is what we do every week on Run Your Pool. I'll drop the link in our YouTube just comments down below. I still can't put links in the YouTube description because it's a new channel, but we've got 5 games this week. It's a 5-week pick'em, 5-game pick'em per week. No points, no spread. Just pick the winner. Game 1 is a Friday night game. Big 12, Big 10. Illinois at Kansas. Fascinating game because Kansas didn't play their presumed starter, Jalen Daniels, last week. He still got a tight back. He may not start. Hard to say. Probably game time decision. Illinois didn't look super great against, was it Toledo? It was Toledo. Yeah, it was Toledo. And that came down to the wire. Again, Toledo's a very good team, though. Like, they're that's MAC. Are they AAC or MAC? They're MAC. Oh, my God. I think they're MAC. That sounds right.
Toledo is MAC, I believe.
They're not like, I want to say MAC power, quote unquote, but they're one of the longest streaks of having 9+ wins in the country. So they're a very good program. So I'm not going to take away from them by saying, oh, Illinois struggled with a lesser team. Toledo's a solid program. And they're going on the road to Lawrence with an energized fan base. Last season kind of shocked their own fans. Oh, damn, we got a team again. We haven't had a team since 07, 08. They've sucked for a long time. And they cratered hard and very fast.
And Jalen Daniels going down at the back end of
that really, it seemed like it took the wind out of the sails. But now, is he going to come back? You get the energized fan base. You got a Big Ten program coming in to Lawrence early season. The weather should be great for a Friday night game. That's going to be really fun to watch. Saturday, the first game of the day, or at least one of the first games in that opening window, Utah goes to Baylor. Baylor's in an interesting spot because they just got their butts whipped. If they go 0-2, Oof, that's going to be a rough start.
Well, hold
Utah's
on, and you forgot the big point. They got their butts whipped by the Texas State
yes,
Bobcats.
yeah,
So good old Sam Marcus, man.
yeah.
They showed up, man. Big party school. They partied hard that night, I'm
Oh,
sure,
I'm
because
sure. And
that
Utah's
is a
coming to
major.
town, and Utah's coming
Like
off
it,
a major win.
they looked solid. So yeah.
So you wonder how is their health progressing with their quarterback situation? Again, much like with what I said with like ISU coming off an emotional win, like it kind of
Sure.
proved the doubters wrong win. Does Utah going on the road after a big home win, do they have any kind of issues early season with consistency? We've got a top 25 matchup in Tulane of all places. The
Ole
Green
Miss and
Wave.
Tulane. Green Wave, buddy.
Oh,
Yes.
Ole Miss goes to Tulane, of course, and then Iowa at Iowa State, and Texas at Alabama. So those 3 games
Yeah.
fusion. I've done a lot of talking here.
Yeah.
What is your takeaway for those 3 games?
Jalen Daniels, regardless of if he plays or not, I really think that this is a game that sets up. It just feels like a letdown game for the Jayhawk fans. So no rock chalk this weekend. I'm picking the Fighting Illini to go in to Lawrence and beat Kansas. I think that they squeaked out that win last week, but I think it's Brett Bielema. That's the head coach,
Yep,
right? Bielema's their coach.
former
I
Hawkeye.
think he, yeah, I think he's starting to figure things out with Illinois. So I'm not going to say that they're going to go on a major tear or they're a major player, but I think that they're going to go in and beat Kansas. Obviously, I'm picking Utah to just outright stomp Baylor. Baylor looked horrible against Texas State. One of my old schools. Um, I think that I watched that game and it was embarrassing for Baylor. Like they were a mess. And that game was a bigger blowout than the final score indicated. But I believe Cam's going to play this week, if I'm not mistaken, against Baylor. So that'll give them much more leadership because I think that was the one thing Utah was lacking. Like they had playmakers, that freshman quarterback who was a runner, and then I forget the backup quarterback. They had basically they were well coached, but you could tell they didn't have leadership. Cam is their guy, and if Cam's going to come back this week, hopefully, I think they blow the doors off of Baylor and Waco. Ole Miss and Tulane. I'm happy to see an early, 24, 20 versus 24 and Tulane on the board. I'm picking Tulane to win this game. I was disappointed with what I saw from Ole Miss last week. I like the Tulane quarterback. I forget his name now. Trying to think of this quarterback. What is the quarterback's name? Michael Pratt. I think he is underrated, and I'm picking Michael Pratt to probably throw. I'm going to say 4 touchdowns this week against Ole Miss.
Interesting.
Lastly, it's going to be a close game. I'm picking the Hawkeyes to take out Iowa State. I think that with defense and special teams carrying the load, even if McNamara is just going to be handing it off to Johnson all Saturday, all day Saturday, I think at the end of the day they can rely on the defense to get them some points, whether it be positioning points for like the kicking unit. I think that Iowa's going to win this. It's not going to be a blowout win, man. I think it's going to be a
Yeah.
grinder
It would take a
close
couple
game.
of pick sixes to be a more than seven
And
point win.
for me, I think I'm going to say this is probably where Iowa does get their first pick six of the season, but that's not going to make it a blowout. I think that's what's going to keep them in. Like offensively, they're going to struggle, kick a lot of field goals, maybe have a touchdown, and you're looking at like you said, like a 20, like a 24 to 24 to 21 type of game, at the end of it. So I don't think it's going to be a last kick to win it all, but I think it's going to be very very close at the end. And then, like I said, I'm picking Texas, man, to go into Tuscaloosa. I think that Texas, the defense is solid, but also I think they're going to really look at the tape on the offense and see that they weren't distributing to all of their weapons. They have so many weapons at receiver and at running back now. I think they're going to make sure they put them in the right position. And the play calling last year, Ewers was able to get the ball deep. I don't like his deep ball. I really don't because it kind of floats. But when it's more of when it's not really a deep ball, when he throws more like what I think is more like an out mid range ball, he has the strength to make it go deep. But when he throws like that deep pass, it just kind of sits for me. I don't think there's a need for that. I think they're going to go ahead and just pick apart the Alabama defense this weekend with their receiving core. There's plenty of guys that can put out there. Xavier Worthy, they got the freshman Napier, they got JT Sanders. They can put guys in space to pick them apart, and then by the third quarter, really let the running game just kind of sit on their necks, and then end it all. So I'm picking the Longhorns there.
Fair enough. So my picks, I only am picking one game different. So we need to start because we need to start differentiating.
Obviously, I think in the next couple of weeks, it's going to get a little.
Yeah.
We're going to get more variety in our picks.
Yeah. Well, especially once conference season starts.
Yeah.
So for me, as aforementioned, I'm picking Alabama to win.
Sure.
Also picking Iowa to win.
Okay.
I'm picking Tulane as well. I think they've got that, like, hey, we're the small school, big teams coming in. We've got the energy. They've got a lot of talent. They're underrated. I think they're going to show up and kind of say, hey, we belong. I think they're going to pull it off. And of course, I'm picking Utah. That was kind of our easy pick 'em for the week. Because we do have some people who are in our pool that aren't really football followers. So I wanted to kind of give them a, hey, this is the ranked team. Pick that one. And then the interesting one for me that I'm going different is I'm picking the home team. Just early season, I'm sticking with the home team. In this case, I don't have an overwhelming abundance of confidence in Illinois right now. I do think they're a better team than they looked against Toledo. Again, it comes down to Toledo's pretty good, actually. So I don't. It's gonna be, again. That's another close game. I want to say the line right now is, at least on Run Your Pool, it's a 3.5. So in early season, lines don't shift a ton because again we haven't seen all these teams. Jalen Daniels hasn't played. So and to what level will he play if he does? Have they officially ruled him out?
No, not yet. No.
I'll be watching that one because if they officially rule Daniels out, I'm flipping my pick. If they officially rule him out, yes, go Illinois. But that'll be a game time thing, and I'll stay tuned to that up till kickoff. So that's a 6:30 kickoff, I believe, tomorrow night on ESPN2. Or I guess if I get this up Friday, the game's tonight. The other games are all Saturday games. We got an 11 a.m., a couple 2:30 games, and then the evening game with Texas and Alabama. So that should be a really, really fun Saturday of college football. But I have one question for you. And this might be a longer thing. Well, I guess two. Number one, with our college football playoff talk, how worried are you about Clemson? Obviously, it seems like they're kind of out of the running at this point, but if they run the table, they're back in.
Yeah.
I don't think they will. But how concerned were you by that game? Because I watched some of it going like, some of those are just fluke as fuck plays. Like, you get a helmet on the goal line and the guy takes it 80 yards the other way. Like, you can't, script that. That's not in any game plan. But that's how they get a turnover, and they stop you from scoring. Talk about a swing. That's a 14-point swing right there. But how worried are you about Clemson after their performance against Duke?
Obviously I picked them to be in the playoff mix. Two things happened this weekend. One, I gained a ton of respect for Florida State from what I saw from them. Norvell really put some serious talent on that defensive side of the football. The other thing I noticed was outside of the fluke plays, I thought play calling for Clemson was horrible. I thought that they didn't show much in terms of leadership. And I didn't really like the way, of course, you see the quarterback kind of ignoring Dabo, but overall, it felt different. It didn't feel like Clemson of the past, the past 8-9 years, where I think there is a little bit of a period where they have to figure out what the next step. And I didn't like. I didn't like Dabo's energy as well. It just didn't look like they were in the right mindset. And I think maybe they weren't prepared for Duke. Even though when you go back and look at Duke's record last year, they were a good football team, and they had some very close losses last year. They could have easily been a one or two loss team last year. There were some really close games there. Is Duke legit? No, I don't think so. But I think this was that typical early season. Every couple of years, we come a top team that is. Are they overhyped or were they not prepared? I'm a little worried. I'll be honest, a little worried about Clemson, just a little bit. Now they run the table. It's going to still be hard because Florida State's going to still be there. At the end of it. So I'm still going to. I'm going to say that they're going to figure it out, but they dropped all the way to 25 in the AP poll. That's going to be a
Yeah.
challenge for them to get all the way
I
back
think
up.
all the voters saw those Brian Ferentz memes.
Yeah, to drop 16 spots from week 1 to week
While the
2
team you beat moves into the top 25, that's tough.
That's there were things there that the AP saw that they didn't like from Clemson, and my gut is I normally don't like to listen to writers, but I'm trusting that they saw something there that they didn't like, and whether it be that maybe the talent isn't there, or
Oh, they
maybe
can't be
they're not.
talent. How many 5 stars do they even have? Crazy.
Yeah, but
Is it development? Is it
because
buy-in?
I mean there were several seasons where Tom Herman at Texas and Charlie Strong brought in massive amounts of 5-star athletes, and they were horrible. Both coaches were horrible because they were poorly coached. As talented as they were poorly coached. So maybe it's a case of the wrong 5 stars. No, I don't know. I don't know at this point. It's 1 week, man. They could come out and score 70 points next week, and
Yeah, kind of theme of the day. Do you want to overreact right now? Who do they
I
got
don't.
this
I
week?
wouldn't say. I don't. I wouldn't say so. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna overreact.
Yeah, who do they got this week? Because they pretty quickly,
They
don't
have
they have?
They have Charlton. They have
So that should be a
Charleston.
bounce back. But then they got FAU, and then they're versus Florida State in week 4.
Yeah.
So they come out firing with their schedule in the ACC after the Duke game.
It's going to be tough because if after 4 weeks they're 2-2, it's going to look really hard for them at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this was a loss this is a loss that's going to really weigh them down. Really, really weigh them down. Like they're going to have to go on a massive tear because they still have Notre Dame, they still have North Carolina, like they still have a shot. But they would have to run the table, like convincingly beat Florida State. If they beat Florida State in a couple weeks, then they will probably jump all the way back up to like 15, let's just say. And they take out North Carolina, they take out Notre Dame. It's possible, but it's going to be really hard when you drop all the way down 25.
Agreed.
That's hard.
Completely understand. So, but my follow up to that is, if Clemson's dynasty is done, basically, if we want to say it's definitely on the backslide,
yeah,
it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you are a little older of a fan than I am, but like when Kirk Ferentz at Iowa had his big moments in his very early in his career at Iowa, and then kind of not petered off, but just kind of plateaued at around the 8 to 10 win per year kind of threshold. Does Dabo turn into that, where like the kind of national titles are done? Or do you think he turns it like has another upswing with Clemson?
I think he has another upswing because Clemson and Florida State are going to maintain the premier status in the ACC in terms of football. I don't think I think they're going to be willing to spend the money to bring in the right kind of not just talent, but I mean like the coaches around as well. So I think we may be looking at kind of a lull here for a couple years. Yeah, and then he'll bounce back.
Fair enough. Speaking
He's
of,
he's a very good coach, man.
I'm not trying to disparage at all. Just asking the questions because it's a podcast.
Yeah.
Speaking of podcast questions, I have one more for you before we get out of here.
Okay.
There's an article I read from The Athletic. I think it was Stuart Mandel, who hasn't had a ton of nice things to say about Kirk, or at least from what I've read recently. And of course, I'm an Iowa homer, so it's gonna slant my bias.
Sure.
I'm curious on your take of this question. From the outside, as a Texas guy, when following the sport as long as you have, is Kirk Ferentz a college football Hall of Fame coach? For record, he's at like 59.8% win percentage right now. A 10-win season this year gets him career 60%, including a bowl game.
Well, let's put it. I think I speak as a Texas guy. The recently passed away Texas coaching legend Mike Leach is at what 59.9%.
He's the same spot, but he obviously changed the game. He's a shoe-in. If they don't put him in, no one's getting in.
He's the pirate. He's a character. He didn't win any national titles, but like I think
the air raid changed the game.
The air raid changed the game. I mean, hell, yeah, it did change the game. It made the entire Big 12.
And he did it in Iowa. Just saying.
Yep.
Iowa Wesleyan.
He turned the Big 12 into an offensive league for a long stretch there. Here's the thing though, is that I think it's less about being from Texas and that just nationally, I think unless you're really engrossed into college football, you ask like an average, like a casual college football fan, and they don't know too much about Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah, he's not
Like
a look at me coach.
he's not a household name. So, you know, he's had really good moments on the big stage. So if me being like, if you're talking about like me, the old media guy, hell yeah, he's a Hall of Famer, right? If he gets to if he gets to that 60% win percentage, he's in, right? If you talk to me like as like someone that would not like is not so ingrained into football itself, I would be like, oh, he could be a fringe guy, Like I can get arguments either way, which I understand. I can get that, but man, I'm gonna say he's a Hall of Famer. I'm gonna say he's a Hall of Famer. Now, people will start questioning like what really needs to be on a resume. Like, do national championships need to be on a resume? All these other questions are going to come up if he ends up becoming a Hall of Fame coach.
Because I think criteria is the 60%, but
It's
there are
60%,
like
yeah.
50 coaches that aren't, right? Like
Yeah.
Hayden Fry didn't hit 60%.
No.
He was at 56, but his coaching tree, I mean, that you can't talk about modern college football without talking about Hayden Fry. You just can't. All the Stoops guys, Brett Bielema, Kirk Ferentz, Dan McCarney, Bill Snyder, like Barry Alvarez, all those
So then
guys.
you talk about the contribution to the game of college
Yeah.
football. What would you say Kurt's
I think
contribution is?
right now it's hard to say in hindsight because so many, especially former players, like
Yeah.
Fry's players in the 90s are just now getting to be head coaches. So it's really hard to say with Kirk because he's still coaching.
Yeah.
A lot of his guys, there's a ton of them in the NFL. They're not done yet. Some of them are starting to get into coaching. Drew Tate is at UNI. He's a tight ends coach, though strikes me as a future quarterbacks, offensive coordinator, potentially head coach guy. His current staff has former players who've got into coaching. Many of them strike me as guys that will be head coaches somewhere. LeVar Woods, Kelvin Bell, Adele Betts. Like he's had the All-Americans. He's had the National Coach of the Years. He's third all-time Big Ten wins. One more Big Ten win, he gets third all-time alone behind Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes. He's won Coach of the Year Big Ten 4 times. That's the most ever. And he's tied again with those legends and Paterno. So, and if he gets to 200 wins at Iowa, so that would mean he's coaching into next season, assuming he doesn't retire this offseason. He'd be and if he wins this week, he's 200 career. He'd be the only 200 career winning FBS coach to not make the Hall of Fame. Think about that stat. A 200 game winner isn't in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. As you're talking this out, I think the big thing that'll push the momentum to push him in is he had this sustained success within the Big Ten.
And a growing Big Ten. Like I saw one guy's analysis was, Fry broke up the Big Two, but there were only 10 to 11 teams. Like it's far harder now to win the Big Ten than it ever was under Hayden Fry. Because again, you have to compare Ferentz to Fry because he's his successor. They both were there for 20 plus years. You have to have that conversation. But I imagine when he retires, and this is what something the new AD is going to have to do. You need to have a co-coach statue. You need to have Hayden Fry with Kirk. Because obviously Kirk, that was one of his first jobs, was coaching under Hayden Fry. Fry doesn't have a statue yet. His family said they didn't want one, at least while he was alive. He only passed a few years ago. And it took us a while to get Niall Kinnick a stadium, even a statue, even after we named the stadium after him. But I imagine, like, as soon as Kirk retires, hey, we're going to commission a statue. You're going to have, entering the field, you're going to have Kinnick in the middle, flanked by Fry and Ferentz, and you need to have it happen. But for my money, he'd be a Hall of Famer. Just the 200 wins, all the guys that are playing in the next level, the fact that he's had the success at Iowa and sustained it and turned it around, too. They were a one-win team that first year. Won some big bowls, has some national accolades, never won a title, but it's Iowa. Were you ever expecting us to win a title? Like, expectations of the job should be taken into account.
Yeah.
He
shouldn't be punished. He shouldn't be punished because it's not a legacy program like
he didn't take over at Ohio State. Like we're not expecting that. Fans, we're cool with 9 to 10 wins. That's pretty good, especially in today's landscape. And the fact that he stayed at Iowa, didn't leave, Obviously, there's some black marks though. The hiring of his
Yeah.
son, the still keeping. I will say, when he hired his son, the guy was qualified. You
Yeah.
know, our running game was actually really good when he was the run game coordinator, and then fell off the cliff when he became offensive coordinator. Sticking with him, the stuff with Chris Doyle, the Rabdo stuff also with Chris Doyle, where they put kids in the hospital. But then you have other stuff where like his outreach with his former players, like they all are coming back, they're all still around the program. It just seems like he's kept the program in a really really strong spot. That's hard to do that in. You know, even like Wisconsin's had troubles doing that. And that speaks to I think he should be in the hall, but it's not a slam dunk. Like Leach, if you don't put Leach in the hall, burn the hall down. That's a slam dunk. The guy, you cannot talk about college football without Mike Leach.
Yeah.
There's much like if they would have kept Hayden Fry out, what are you doing? Like, are you insane?
Well, with that said, then you shouldn't have to punish Kirk Ferentz.
No.
You know, because of his sustained success within the Big Ten, but he did win, like you said, didn't win championships, things like that. But those shouldn't be indicators of him having not being worthy. He's hit on a few really good marks. The 60% win percentage is probably the biggest thing for me. He has won a Big Ten title. So it's
I
like,
still
okay.
wish with the 0-2 game, if that would have happened, oh my God. And then 0-9, his starting quarterback goes down when we were fucking loaded on defense. I mean, you talk about last year's D, 0-9 was insane.
He has coached them to the college football playoff. So
No,
there are things.
no, Rose Bowl.
No,
if we had won the 2015 title game,
that's
absolutely, we'd have won
That's
the right to get smoked by Alabama. But
that's right.
we'd have been in.
Yeah, I think he's in. I think he's in.
I agree, and it really depends how long does he keep coaching.
Yeah,
you know, because he's at 20. This is his 25th season, so a literal quarter of a century with one coach, which is crazy.
Yeah,
like that. You say that to anybody who has only been really following the sport for a few years and watching all these coaching contracts and stuff, and you tell them, oh yeah, Kirk's been in Iowa for 25 years, just 8-9 wins a year, plugging away. What the fuck? Which is crazy because Iowa makes money. Like you would expect them to be a more, hey, turn up the pressure kind of job, but they just aren't.
Yeah.
So that's just an interesting question, especially as we're on the potential. The weekend he gets to 200 career wins, I thought I might as well ask that question.
Yeah.
Any other notes you have for the week, from week 1 or 2?
No, that's the only other thing is that Colorado TCU game.
Yeah, that was fun
I think
to
at
watch.
this point, I think we need to really keep an eye out for Colorado because now you're talking about two potential players potentially being Heisman candidates on that roster.
Oh, for sure.
And Shedeur Sanders has in that game really has turned heads to him being a first round quarterback, and that's much deserved. The one thing I want to say is
dude was lighting it up.
Coach Prime really coached up those players. The fact that he flipped that roster within a couple weeks, like I'm talking about completely flipped it, but those players came out there and they were well coached. They were disciplined and they executed for the most part. That was a very impressive win by Colorado. So I'm going to definitely keep an eye. I know they can take the foot off the gas a little bit for Nebraska. That's fine.
That said, though, you talk about bulletin board material. You everyone in the country's like, yeah, but it's Nebraska. They got a new coach and they blew a loss, but like the defense looked pretty solid. They made plays. They just gave up like a heartbreaking touchdown at the end against a not overwhelmingly great Minnesota team, but it's not like Minnesota's a slouch, No, they didn't just lose to Northwestern again.
Right.
Like they lost on the road in Minneapolis in a one-score game with a new coach. It just comes down to, are they really that cursed?
Yeah, Matt Rule's going to clean things up. Another year of NIL and transfers, they'll get better
with their money, with their fans. Yeah.
But it's going to be keep an eye on Colorado because it suddenly makes the the Pac-12 a very interesting conference in its last.
They've got how many dudes at the quarterback position that are just going to, like I said earlier with Colorado's, they're going to light it up.
Yeah.
Like they're going to light up scoreboards all across the conference.
This has been fun, man. Really has been fun, man. Can't wait for the games this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, so what's on the menu this week for you?
Probably gonna go with pork belly burnt ends this weekend.
Nice. For me, I'm still doing my wings.
Okay.
I just because I was going through the menu of like the meat counter and I was like, what do they got? Okay, I saw some steaks, got some chicken. Like there's some leg quarters I could do. Really, get a good rub on there and just go to town on the grill. But then I saw, oh, they got actual prepped chicken wing sections. I don't have to cut them. Yes.
Nice.
I got in a groove last week. My wings came out perfect. The first couple, I was like, I couldn't find the joint. I was too rusty, and then I started getting into it, and I got them just done right after kickoff. So
Ooh.
this week I'll have them dialed in because they're already ready for me.
Nice.
All right, well, we're gonna get out of here for the week 2 show, episode 3. If you're in our Run Your Pool, let me know how you guys are doing, what you think of the season so far, and if you want to join that, it is free. So the link will be in the description. Not in the description, it'll be in the comments because of YouTube's stupid, rules. So, see you, everybody.